Welcome into the newest episode of the Hoth Hangout podcast. Glad to have you here with us, joining us for episode 104 of the pod. Want to give you a quick reminder before we get into today's discussion about the what if Luke Skywalker turned to the dark side discussion we're having here today. Want to give you that quick reminder that if you are not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout channel on YouTube, check us out there for the video version of the podcast and our latest reactions to all Star Wars shows when they go live. Shout out to the 458 of you who are subscribed over on YouTube. Check it out and hit the subscribe button over there if you have not, or if you're watching the video version of the podcast right now. You can also contact us via email at hothangout@gmail.com with your Star Wars thoughts, questions, or otherwise, and we'd love to showcase them on the pod. And of course, you can find the Hoth Hangout podcast wherever you get your pods, including both Apple and Spotify. And if you're listening on either of those platforms or any platform that allows you to leave a 5-star review, leave a 5-star review on the podcast. We'd appreciate it very much. And it also allows other people that love Star Wars to discover the podcast more easily. You can find us on the socials on TikTok, Instagram, and X. We're at Hoth Hangout on each of those platforms, as well as you can find the link to the Hoth Hangout community Discord server down in the show notes of today's episode as well. And moving into our discussion today, of course, we are talking all things what if Luke Skywalker had turned to the dark side? And so, our question we would like to pose to you as we get into the mindset of this discussion is: would you want to see Luke join Vader in some alternate reality, in a what if reality, if you will? Of course, that is what we're going to be discussing today. Lots of other fun news to discuss as well in regards to upcoming Star Wars projects. But before we get into that, what's going on, Joey? How you doing?
Pretty good. This is gonna be a fun one. I think I was inspired by What If from the Marvel universe, as well as Rebuild the Galaxy. We kind of saw a little bit of alternate realities, alternate universes, with Darth Jar Jar and Darth Rose Tico and Surfer Luke. I mean, I definitely wasn't expecting that one. So I think this would be a fun one. I think there's questions that like this alternate reality, does this alternate universe idea that we could have. I don't think we actually have this in Star Wars like we do in Marvel. I don't know. Had you seen the new Deadpool Wolverine movie yet?
I have, yeah. It was. I thought it was pretty good. What'd you think about it?
I enjoyed it. Yeah, me and Jazz actually just watched it this week. Because it's now available on Disney Plus. Not sponsored. But I thought it was pretty good. Gory as you expected, but also has a little heart there at the end too. But no, yeah, because that has a little bit of the many universes that could collide in on each other. If you have not seen the movie, sorry for the big spoiler I just gave you there. But yeah, so to have it in Star Wars, to maybe a little fan fiction. Maybe we're gonna have a little fan fiction reading here today of what would happen if Luke would have just joined Vader and not stayed with the rebellion.
Yeah, that is kind of like the fun thought experiment that's part of this, style of episode, is that it's an opportunity to to kind of flex those creative muscles and be like, all right, what would have happened if things have gone a lot differently? So
Right.
yeah, there may or may not be a fan fiction here in today in today's episode. You'll have to stay tuned for another I don't know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so before we get into the deep fan fiction stuff that I may or may not have written over the weekend. So stay tuned for that one. But before we get into some of our discussions about this what if Luke had turned to the dark side, we had a lot of really interesting and enlightening Star Wars announcements over the past few days. There was I think originally released, it was released in conjunction with, I think, Disney Plus's push for like all of their upcoming stuff. But at the same time, D23 in Brazil was going on, and there is now an official release date for the second season of Andor. A sneak peek was shown of the second season at D23 in Brazil. And there was also, of course, a short clip, as I mentioned, in this Disney Plus ad that was released over the weekend. And so we now know that Andor will be here. Gosh, what would that be? In 6 months' time from now. 6 months in a few weeks.
That's
So
not very long. That's not very long in Star Wars world.
yeah, I'm again. People are pretty, Andor's a pretty polarizing show. Again, I have
Yeah.
a friend who listens to the podcast who's like adamantly that Andor is her least favorite show. I'm like, I don't know. It might be my favorite live action show, but
hmm
so again, a kind of a polarizing show. I'm super excited for season 2. We already know that this has been confirmed as the final season of Andor, so kind of sad in a sense that's like, oh, this will be our last experience. Probably, I would think with the character of Andor in live
hmm
action, unless they maybe bring him back for something at some point, an offshoot movie or something. But clearly, that would have to take place before Rogue One. Sorry for the slight spoilers there. But yeah, what'd you think when you heard this news that it was coming out in April of 2025?
I was happy that we just have a date. It could have been late 2025. I was actually pretty excited that it was April 2025. I wasn't expecting it that early. I thought it was definitely a later in the year type of release. So it makes me think about, what probably won't happen during that time. Because I'm thinking of like Tales of the something would have come up around that time, maybe around May the 4th. Maybe that doesn't happen anymore, or maybe it does. Maybe they have, because I mean they just drop that right in the middle whenever they want. They it wouldn't even matter because they drop all 6 episodes normally. So if there's
Right.
something like that in the works, I mean I would doubt like something like a Vision season 3 would come out at this time, but
Ooh, don't tempt me.
who knows? So yeah, I was more excited that there was a date. I was happy we got some footage out of this Disney Plus ad. We saw the return of Bix, for instance, no
Yep.
longer no longer being tortured. So we know, she gets out of that whole deal. A little bit of interaction with Andor and Luthen, which was really cool. I can't wait for another 5-minute speech from Luthen in season 2. But yeah, I'm excited. It did exactly what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And not only did we get news about Andor, we also got a new well, we didn't get, I should say. The folks at D23 were able to watch a new action-packed scene as it was described from the upcoming series Skeleton Crew, which at the time of this recording, well, I guess I should say at the time of the release of this podcast episode, let's see, it'd be 19 days, I think, until less than 3 weeks till Skeleton Crew comes
Nice.
out, which, as a reminder, we'll be watching each episode here on the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel. Check out our reactions to those episodes as they come out over on the Hoth Hangout YouTube. But again, the folks at D23 got a special look at a particular scene. I actually haven't heard much buzz about this, Joey, other than the fact that they saw it. Have you heard anything else in regards to like the content of the scene that they watched?
No, the only thing again I saw was action packed, so I didn't really see much of. And I'll be honest, I didn't really search it out either. I'm of the camp where if it was not meant for me to be seen, I will not be looking for it for the most part.
Yeah.
There are things that I have looked for sure in the past, but for this one, I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna let this, whatever they want to show me, on, and because this was also a clip that was on the Disney Plus ad as well, so there's a little bit of action in there. You got action of the kids and Jude Law, so not a ton to dissect you into that clip, but pretty fun one as well.
You're telling me you're not one of the 2012 Reddit bros who, when Han Solo died in, or not 2012, what year did Force Awakens come out?
19, right?
2015?
Oh, 15. I'm sorry, 15.
Yeah, the 2015 Reddit Star Wars bros who were commenting Han Solo dies just to spoil it for people.
Oh no, are you serious? I don't remember. Yeah, good thing I wasn't on Reddit then.
Yeah.
Although I
Anyways, yeah.
guess, wait, what were they doing that before the movie came out, or
Like the day it came out,
the
people
day
were,
it came out? Okay.
yeah. It'd be like, look at this cute picture of my daughter and her boyfriend at homecoming, and the top comment is Han Solo dies.
No
You
way.
know,
Oh, that's
just
the
stuff
worst.
that was like not related to any. Anyways, yeah. So I'm of the same mind of you. When there's something that's not intended for me to have seen yet, I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm gonna try my best to avoid that,
Mhm.
and not spoil it for other people if I am in the group of people who has happened to have seen that. So, like the folks at D23 who got to see this action-packed scene from Skeleton Crew. So, Skeleton Crew also did have a short snippet in that Disney Plus ad we mentioned that had the Andor snippet in it as well. Um, the other piece of news we got from the D23 event was that the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, there was a video message from Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau alongside a sizzle reel that captured the heart of the journey so far and gave fans a look at moments from the theatrical release, including Grogu and Din Djarin facing off with snowtroopers. That's something we like to hear here on the Hoth Hangout channel. A massive Imperial AT-AT walker in the snow, as well as Zeb back in live action. Fun to hear that especially if you're a fan of Star Wars Rebels, and Grogu traveling with two tiny Anzellans, which if I'm correct in my memory, I believe that's the species that Babu Frick
That's
is.
correct. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be a lot of fun to see.
Yeah,
um,
that was. I can't imagine being in the room there for that one. You know,
mhm.
there was a lot of yelling, a lot of cheering for that. The people who love Rebels cheering on for Zeb. Of course, Grogu and the Anzellans got a lot of awe. You know, like awe. You know, so I'm excited for the fandom. I'm excited to see what comes of this movie, and still slotted for May 22nd, 2026. So hopefully that that date stays the same. Well, a little spoiler for next week. We may be talking about some projects for Star
Mm.
Wars, and that being one of them.
Gosh, that feels so far away.
That feels
May
very
of
far away, actually.
2026. Hopefully, it comes quicker than we think, but nonetheless, I wish we could have been in on this sizzle reel, gotten this video message. I wonder, do you think this is something they'll release to the public at a later time?
I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to think of when they originally had the Mandalorian like announced at 2019. Well, not announced, but 2019 at Celebration. There was like they showed the first like few minutes of the episode, and because I was at that panel, so I remember that. And I don't think they ever really showed that, but they did also have something very similar to this, where it was like kind of giving you, it was like Dave and John, like they're my buddies, Dave and John, you know,
Hmm.
that they were out there, they were talking about like the some of the how they made the show, how some of the effects and all this stuff. So I think that ended up finally making it to like Disney Plus a little bit. So I don't know if something like this will show it as well, just because it's like probably in the movie, right? Since it's going to be a movie, I'm sure that once it makes it to Disney Plus or whatever, they'll have like every piece of content that was made up to that point, including this.
Yeah, I would love to see this. I hope it gets released at some point because I want to
Hmm.
be in the know like the people in the room were.
Yeah, right. The room where it
Hey.
happened.
The room where it happened. Yeah, exactly. What is that from? Is
It's
that
from
Hamilton?
Hamilton. Yeah, it's from
Yeah,
Hamilton.
I was like, I know that reference
Yeah.
from somewhere.
All
I
right,
actually,
Ben. Nice.
yeah, I got some of that musical theater knowledge,
Good.
you
Good.
know.
Good. Good. I was like, please don't go over your head. I might have to end this podcast if you don't know what that is.
I actually saw Hamilton for the first time. Side note, probably like 6 to 8 months ago.
Oh, really? What do you think of
Yeah,
it?
it was good. I thought the first act was a lot stronger than the second
Yeah.
act.
Yeah.
But I liked it a lot. I feel like most of the songs I was familiar with were also from the first act, which was maybe why I thought the first act was so much stronger. But
Hmm.
yeah, tune into our side podcast coming soon, our musical theater analysis podcast.
Like, I know you're joking, but I'd be all in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We could get like a crew of people to do it too, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's one of those things I feel like people get really passionate about. But anyways, we do have one more piece of news today before we start our discussion around um the Luke Skywalker what if topic for today. Simon Kinberg, best known, I believe, for his work on a lot of the X-Men franchise films, has officially signed on to both write and produce a new Star Wars trilogy. And now it's technically not confirmed and somewhat unclear if this trilogy is the reported Rey Skywalker trilogy, which has potentially been in the works. Originally, of course, it was reported that there was going to be this Rey movie, And now it's seeming like there might be a Rey trilogy, and there's information out there as well that episodes 10, 11, and 12 are in the works as a trilogy. So, like, is Kinberg's trilogy different from the Rey trilogy? Is it
Hmm.
different from the 10, 11, 12 trilogy? Like, are we dealing with 3 different trilogies here, or are they all the same thing? There's
Right.
still no official confirmation on any of that, but nonetheless, this was news from the past week that he signed on to write and direct a new Star Wars trilogy, whatever that ends up being. What do you think, Joey?
I don't know. There's like, listen, I want there to be more Star Wars. I want there to be more Rey stories. Yes. But just the way that this information is kind of being piecemeal to us, I guess, is the best way.
Hmm.
Whether it's, this is going to be a trilogy or not going to be a trilogy, or, oh, Stephen, was it Stephen Wright? Was that his name? The writer
Yeah.
that left recently? Yeah.
Uh,
So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, he was, he stepped away from the project, and now we have this, and yeah, it's just a big cluster of just confusion of what to be actually excited for. That's why I was so excited, and we knew Andor was pretty much all wrapped up and done, so that's why I was excited. Like, give us a date, we're good. But something like this, I mean, obviously the Mandalorian Grogu. We have the what's the wasn't there like an earlier era movie as well that was supposed to be
Yeah.
there?
Dawn of the Jedi. That's
Dawn of the Jedi,
the
yes.
James Mangold one, I'm
Right,
pretty
yeah.
sure.
So there's, sort of there are all of these movies that hopefully get made, and now we're talking about a full trilogy all of a sudden. I don't really remember this going to be a thing. And and especially if it's going to be something that's going to be named. I mean, if it's officially going to be named, I don't know if this isn't official, but if it's going to be episode 10, 11, 12, you know how much, I mean, that's what gives me the most anxiety, because, like, people are going to be looking at that with, like,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
a magnifying glass and making sure everything looks right, where it could have been just kind of like, all right, well, this is what Ray did, like, after episode 9, and that's doesn't have
Right.
to be anything like that. But once you put the episode number after it, I think that's when it gets a lot more scrutiny, a lot more people would be a lot more critical about it.
Yep.
But I mean, whatever. You and I, we'll take it. We'll, like, all right, well, what kind of Star Wars is it? We'll be fine with it. But just knowing how many shows and movies and such have come and gone, either got canceled or canned or on hold, or I think that's again a thing to talk about maybe in a future episode. But for sure, that's exactly where I went to when I heard this news.
Yeah. I guess my biggest two thoughts is like they can announce whoever they want is directing. Like it's like
Right.
oh cool, like Steven Spielberg signed on.
Right.
He didn't actually. I'm just it
Right.
could be some massive director, and you're like awesome. Like there's a 75% chance this doesn't get made because that's the track record we're working with right now.
Absolutely.
And then the other thought, like to the 10, 11, 12, thing being if they do go that route with naming the episodes that, first of all, like I don't, again, I don't really understand the reasoning. Like if the episodic, numbering of the previous, 6 or 9 is supposed to be like the Skywalker saga,
Right.
and there's so much controversy around the idea that like Rey being a Skywalker, even, it's like I feel like it's, in a way, it's just like, see, she is. Now we have 3 more about the Skywalker
Right.
saga. And you just know what the reaction is gonna be. Like, I don't really understand, like, give Rey a good movie. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
get a well-written script
One
in there.
solid movie,
Yeah,
and then
like,
kind of go from there.
make sure her character is well written in a way that can, like, people will receive it well, and just like
Hmm.
just be like this. Well, actually, it's gonna be more Skywalker saga,
Right.
and Rey is gonna be that Skywalker. Like people aren't gonna take that well. So
Right.
I don't know.
I look at Ray like the last year of, like, an NBA player in the last year of their contract. Like, show me that you could really do well, and then we're going to give you a lot of money going ahead. So I feel like that's what they need to do with Ray here, is just give her one really solid, well written movie, well written storyline, and then go. I mean, not everything has to be a trilogy. It's fine. We could have a one off, like you said. And I think when you say this is just going to be a trilogy, I think that just sets you up for a lot of different things. I mean, the same kind of goes with like TV shows, and maybe that's where the mindset is coming from, like the TV show side of things, where you make a season and you really don't know if you're going to be greenlit for the next season. Let's look at Acolyte. Let's look at like Boba
That's
Fett.
what I was gonna say too. Yeah.
So so you just really don't know. And but at least with the movie, you have. And I don't know what the hours necessarily put into a movie or the money, but at least you have just that movie, and then you don't if it doesn't perform well, then you're like, okay, well, that's too bad. But to have Kinberg come in and say, oh, another trilogy, because that's what everyone does, I just feel like that's you're just painting yourself into a corner.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And sadly, the trilogy model, it's purely just a money thing, which,
Hmm.
if it does well, it does well. I just hope it does well with a well-written story. So, remains to be seen if this, wouldn't be shocked if this guy a year from now is like signing off of doing the project, because that tends to be the way things go nowadays.
This is
By
the
the way,
way.
this is the way. Yeah. By the way, Stephen Knight, yeah, the name of that guy
Okay.
who recently signed off from the Daisy Ridley film project. But that's the way of Star Wars. This is the way nowadays it seems. But we'll keep our ears to the pavement. Is that the expression?
Sure, we'll go with it.
As as to what comes about this in future news. So that about does it for the news in today's episode. We have no viewer comments to showcase this week. And we also want to showcase some results from the poll that we asked on the YouTube community tab as well as over on X. Um, we asked the question, of course, in last week's episode where we talked about Star Wars films and TV shows. The question was, which Star Wars do you like better, movies or TV shows? On the YouTube community tab, 79% of voters responding with movies, meanwhile, 21% responding with TV shows. I feel like that's like probably relatively representative of the general Star Wars population, but maybe I would guess that that's more reflective of like an older generation of Star Wars fans,
Mm-hmm.
and probably like the younger you get in your generations of Star Wars fandom. I think the reflection of getting closer to like a 60-40 movies, or maybe even like a 50-50,
Mm-hmm.
would be more indicative of a younger generation. But so those are the results on YouTube, and meanwhile, the results over on the Auth Hangout X account were even more one-sided in that 100% of the votes went towards movies when we asked you all which Star Wars do you like better. So a lot of movie fans out there. Can't lie, I would vote for movies as well, but I'm loving a lot of the TV shows. So hopefully, Star Wars can even up the trend of the quality of TV shows they make in the near future, and films too. I'm excited that we're going back to that model with Mando and Grogu in about a year and a half time. So cast your votes in this week's community poll, which you can find on the YouTube community tab or over on the Hoth Hangout X account. Check it out. Have your vote cast and your response heard and showcased in next week's episode of the podcast. As you mentioned, Joey, the big inspiration for today's episode, of course, is kind of related to this whole "What If" Marvel series, where if something was different, or even the opposite of what how it actually went down, what would be the overall effect of that on the universe that it takes place in? And so, I think a Star Wars "What If" series is something that people have really advocated for a long time. And like you said, with the creation of Lego Star Wars Rebuilt the Galaxy, more or less it kind of feels like a Star Wars what if, because they're journeying to this galaxy where like everything is literally the opposite. Jar Jar's a Sith Lord, Count Dooku's a good guy sitting on the Jedi Council. All these things that are just polar opposites of what they are in the universe that we know and love. Which is fun, when you, especially in a context like a Lego movie where nothing is taken seriously. Uh, and so Luke turning to the dark side, I think for a long time has always been one that people have been fascinated with. I think it's just kind of the natural thing that people gravitate towards when they think of like a significant Star Wars event that could have gone down differently or even the opposite of. And so I guess I want to just sort of open the floor to you to begin us here, Joey. If Luke turned to the dark side, do you have like a biggest hot take for what that biggest implication may have been?
I mean, I was thinking about this a little bit. The question would be, how long would he be on the dark side? Because this
Mm.
would be definitely a story of you want a redemption arc for sure on this one. Would it be till kind of Return of the Jedi, time period where it was like that quick, or would it actually extend past that and like to the sequel trilogy? Where he is, continues to be the dark side user. He's the one that is the Darth. What do we call him? Darth.
Darth Tashi.
Darth Tashi.
Yeah.
Would that extend all the way out to that time? And imagine the stories. Remember, Rey and Finn were like, oh, we've heard stories of Luke Skywalker, but now they're going to be hearing stories of that, of Darth, of Darth Luke. Well, I can't say it. I can't do that to Luke. But yeah, we could. So will he be the bad guy going into that series? Maybe that time period is a little bit shorter between the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy at that point. So there's a lot, a lot of implications. I personally, because we know how it all plays out now, right? We know Vader, at the end of Return of the Jedi, kind of goes back to the light because of Luke. Personally, I would like to get a little bit darker because you can. This is a fun thing. It would be a little darker where he would, he would actually be the one that takes out, the Emperor, but then also takes out Vader. So that's kind of like, but the rebellion side of it, Leia's still there. She's the one that is the light side user. Obviously, she's going to be the one that's going to be training with either a Yoda or an Obi-Wan or something like that through there. Maybe because of that, Yoda's like, you know what? I'm going to stick around a little longer. I don't know if you've seen that meme where it's of Yoda dying at Dagobah, where and I think the caption is like, if you have kids, you know exactly why he just wanted to take a nap or whatever. Just too many questions. You just want to go. So maybe if Leia doesn't act that way, he'll stick around a little bit longer. Maybe that's the biggest implication. You have Yoda even longer, and because you need to properly train Leia in a way. And I'll say it again. I keep saying this. We didn't see a ton of training with Luke and Yoda. I mean, on screen, so we don't know how much was done. I always like to joke. It was like a week. It was like, you ever take those classes in summer school where you have to do the entire semester,
Yep.
but like within like 3 weeks. It was like
Yep.
that. It was like a speed course, with Luke. So maybe with Leia, you stretch it out a little longer. So that would be my fun take on it, where it would just be Luke kind of doing the usual Sith thing, where they would go after the Emperor, of course, and maybe Leia it thinks that they're a part of it, but at the end of it, like Luke takes out Vader too, and then he kind of just goes out into the distance. But at least he's gone for now, and then he has to take on a new apprentice, and maybe that's Rey, and then what I mean. So there's a lot of fun twists and turns you can go with it.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, like, well, first of all, before I get into some of my twists and turns that that came up as you were talking, um, do you think the basic idea being, if I'm hearing you correctly, that if Luke turns to the dark side, it is almost like an inevitability that he will turn back to the light, or do you think there's a world where he could just like stay, evil?
I
A
mean,
what if world?
that's the fun part, right? Is that
Yeah.
I think because we know Luke as he is now, you want
Mhm.
him to be, you want him to have that redemption arc. But if that never existed, if this timeline, if this storyline of who Luke was never existed, and he just kind of continued on that dark path, I mean, that could definitely be, kind of compelling as well, where you because they would be the balance. It would be Leia and Luke. That's the balance,
Right.
So that will be the balance between the light and the dark, and like forever. You know what I mean? So I think that would be a kind of cool way to bring that into the storyline.
And then it almost becomes like, I mean, what I immediately thought of is in some scenario where like Vader in his dying moments becomes more like neutral or even good, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Luke, because like Luke killed him, or Luke turned against him and like gave into his hatred. It almost like gives me the same symbolism as the father, son, and daughter in the Mortis like arc.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh
Like
my God,
like
yeah, it does. It sure does.
like Vader is the father, Luke is the brother, Leia is the
Oh,
sister, and they even like occupy the same like
space.
positions of
Yeah.
good and evil. Yeah. That would actually be a really compelling story. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
Luke trains with Vader. They go to defeat the Emperor. They kill the Emperor, and then like Luke feels like this. I don't know, this extreme like quest or craving of
Mm-hmm.
power, and maybe the Emperor like weakened Vader to the point where Luke took advantage and like um, you know wounded him mortally in that moment, and flees. Leia gets to the scene just in time,
Mm-hmm.
saves Vader. Vader says like, there's still good in
There's
your brother. Yeah. And then like he becomes like the father, and then like Leia
yeah, yeah.
represents the light and Luke represents the dark. Anyways, that was like one of the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just and I feel like you could put so many variations on it, which is I think what makes something like this so much fun. So much so that in fact I alluded to, this idea that this has been kind of one of the bigger points in Star Wars history that fans have really enjoyed creating like fan fiction around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and more or less, I began like kind of writing my own
Mm-hmm. I like
in
it.
preparation for this week's episode. And I think I want to focus in on this point of kind of whatever story you want to tell. Like Luke's decision on Cloud City rather than like, telling his father, I'll never join you, saying something along the lines of, I will join you. Do you think that decision is made out of a sense of obligation to his father, obligation to the rebellion, or maybe even like hatred of the Emperor? Like, how do you see Luke taking that first like dip of the toe into the pool of the dark side, so to speak?
Oh, that's a great question. I think there's a combination of it, right? I mean, there is obviously the need to get rid of the emperor, right? So
Mhm.
that's like number one. Number two, you kind of get reunited with your father. I mean, obviously during the Cloud City scene, that's like when he finds out, and he, I think Vader even says like, search your feelings, you know them to be true. So, at some point he does understand that that's what it is there. So that's a lot to take in, that is a possibility. Because I mean, at this point, he doesn't know Leia is his sister, right? As shown by, we won't go into that, but so we know that we know that we know that he understands. He will understand eventually that this is his father, this is his family, his only family that he knows, right? So to have those two things together, and because it becomes a pretty good selling point when Vader's like, we could take him on together, you know,
Mm.
because then the whole dark light thing, it kind of fades away a little bit, because the point is to get to the Emperor, right?
Right.
So that's kind of that's how I would view like his mindset in that question.
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm kind of lean the same way. I think one way that it could be different, and like rather than taking sort of like a I'm doing this, to save my father or to defeat the emperor sort of stance. Like I think if Vader were to have like taken someone away from him, uh or like separated Luke from someone close to him, or like even killed someone close to him especially, I think you would have seen a lot of the stuff that we see from Anakin in Attack of the Clones. Like Anakin, at the end of episode 1, it's like this kid might be the chosen one, and by episode 2, he's throwing like temper tantrums because,
Hmm.
like the Tusken Raiders killed his mother, and this is like the first time he like really, I mean, he's moody throughout the film, don't get me wrong, but like this is the first time Anakin experiences like hatred for someone. And so I almost think in order for Luke's conversion to the dark side to not be like a I'm doing this to like, help the rebellion or help my father or like defeat the emperor, I think it almost would need to be like Vader killed someone close to him if he was going to do it
Mm.
out of like a sense of malice.
Right, that's a
Uh,
good point. And yeah, and you kind of made that parallel to like Anakin. Yeah, that's and even more. And I even kind of, this is kind of like out of left field, but kind of like Kylo and Han, like that kind of as
yeah.
well. Just that father son type of rivalry. I don't know how else to put it really, but um, to be able to make that parallel, I think that would have been a kind of a cool parallel too. If Luke were to join, I think that you also have to remember that um, Luke was like, if you think of the training that Anakin had between Episode 1 and 2, like during that entire time, compare that to what Luke had, you know,
Right. Yeah.
and just constantly, Anakin was constantly surrounded by a lot of Jedi, kind of having this mindset or the proper way to use the Force time and time and time again. Where Luke, I mean, he was super old when he started training. You know, he just doesn't have the time. He doesn't have the reps in to really be able to make that type of decision. The way that someone like Anakin could have, or someone like Obi-Wan could have,
Mhm.
because he just, he never seemed to have faced a ton of that question, having to like fight off the dark side. I don't want to be a part of the dark side. He didn't really have that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I also feel like Luke's conversion to the dark side would be gradual, not because of Luke, but also because of Anakin. Like, if you're his father, somewhere deep down, Vader is like offering this to Luke because he cares about him. Like, he's offering it from a place of like, as much as Vader probably wouldn't have thought this or said it, like the reason he wants Luke to join him is not only in Vader's quest for power, but like this is his bloodline, and he like wants that with him. Like, whether you want to call that love or like selfish, quest for power, like call it whatever you want. Um, but like I think Vader would take a more gradual approach to Luke's training in the dark side because I think if you just like tell Luke, okay, like in order to kill the Emperor, like you're gonna have to practice, feeling these feelings of like giving in to your anger and your hatred.
Right.
So like go, you know, take out that innocent person. Like Luke's gonna be really hesitant to do that at first. And so I feel like the process for training Luke would probably be really gradual and probably like hidden away in secrecy, like
Mm.
take him to Mustafar or something, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like take him to train in a place where it's like brutal. The way he's being trained is painful and aggressive, and it's really like
Right. Yeah.
instilling in him that hatred slowly, rather than just like giving him a mission early on. It's like, all right, you're a dark side user now.
Right. Yeah.
Go do this awful thing.
Do you remember in Jedi Lost, the Count Dooku audio novel,
Hmm.
where
Yeah.
he was training Asajj?
Hmm.
It's just
Yeah.
basically just beating her, like just
Brutal. Yeah.
just brutal. Yeah, and I think that would probably be the way, because the way he did it really was, she developed like hatred for him. You know what I mean? And maybe that's kind of the way to do it. Obviously with it being the bloodline, maybe that's not. I'd be it'd be, here's a good question. Like, what would Vader's endgame be? Obviously
Hmm.
to take out the Emperor, but would it just be throwing away the ways of the Sith and just being like, well, we're just gonna rule the galaxy together. Don't worry about the rule of two. Don't worry about any of that. It's just gonna be you and me. You know what I mean? I'd be interested in what his end game would be.
Right. Well, I think for Vader, like the dark side always presented itself differently than it did for someone like Palpatine. Like for Palpatine, it's just like I'm concerned with like how powerful can I be? Like I'm like uh the personification of evil essentially. Vader, it's always like how much power can I have to put, not really myself, but more so like the people I love in a position.
Hmm.
Especially like with Padme in episode 3.
Right. Right.
Like his whole reasoning for, saying, "I will do whatever you say, master, in order to save Padme." And then he doesn't save Padme, and then it just feels like he's kind of a slave to this ideology of the dark side after that. And even when presented in episode 5, it's like he's like, Luke, you could join me and we could defeat the Emperor. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I think part of Vader's perception of the dark side. What am I trying to say? I guess that Vader's dark sideness is less selfish than Palpatine's is. I don't
Hmm.
know if that feels. I mean, I'm sure there's like people out there who are like hardcore Vader fanatics who are like, no, he's like
He's brutal.
he's brutal, yeah. But like
I don't know. Rogue One
ultimately,
though. Ooh, that was pretty brutal.
right? Yeah. I mean, ultimately, Vader has more struggle in like within himself than
Right.
Palpatine does. Um,
That's why
I
he's
guess
able to be redeemed.
right, exactly, yeah. And so I feel like I I would like to see that same struggle within Luke in whatever idea we have of, his turn to the dark side. It's like watching him struggle in the same way that Anakin struggled in episode 2 and especially at the end of episode 3 would be probably the avenue I would want to see Luke eventually go down in this hypothetical scenario. I want to kind of turn to a different aspect of this conversation and sort of focus on Leia's role in Luke's turn to the dark side and what that role would be. In this like, little fan fiction thing that I wrote in preparation for the episode, I kind of had the idea that Leia would go to Dagobah. She'd be sent by the Force Ghost of Obi-Wan to Yoda after his attempt with Luke fails. He'd say something corny like, "It seems we have to consider our other hope, a new hope."
Thank you,
Uh,
80s writing.
yeah, new hope number two. And so then Leia would then travel to Dagobah, learn from Yoda in the same way that Luke did. Although, if Luke is training with Vader, my idea was like, well, maybe the time is longer here, so Leia actually trains a lot longer with Yoda
Mm.
while Luke is training with Vader.
Well, real quick,
Um,
I'm picturing a side by side like a training montage in the movie.
yeah,
In the 80s.
close up lightsaber shots where their face is illuminated by the color. Um, yeah, and so like during this time, I think, if Luke accepts the hands of Vader on Cloud City, I think most people would probably just presume he was dead. Maybe at this point was my idea. Meanwhile,
Mm.
he's being hidden by Vader and being trained. However, Leia, of course, being the sibling of Luke and now becoming more and more force sensitive, or tapping into her ability to be force sensitive, maybe. Like she's like has this feeling that she knows Luke is alive, which is like driving her training with Yoda. And so she's insisting that this search for him continue. Um, and then that's kind of where I had like the idea of Leia going. And now as to whether she has like a role or involvement in the finality of the conclusion of this different Return of the Jedi arc, I wasn't sure what direction to go. What do you think Leia's role would be? Like, is she present in that throne room battle, or is it still just Vader, Luke, and the Emperor, and it turns out differently?
I could see it happening where she's ready to fight for Luke. That's who she wants to fight for. She can care less about Vader. Obviously, she wants to get rid of the Emperor. She wants to go fight for Luke. And what I'm picturing is that she goes to the throne room battle, and she's running as fast as she can. She goes in there, and then he either if it is the last breath of of Vader that we see, um and then it would almost mimic what happened with Kylo Ren and Rey in that throne room, where he like asked her to join her. Like that is where it would happen there. Like he's like, look, I've got all this power now. Luke would be like that. You know, Vader's idea the entire time was to have them be together. Luke and Vader, to kind of rule the galaxy. But now Luke is now drunk with this power. I mean, that's just what happens with the dark side. Um, so then he ends up ending Vader in some way or whatever, and then there's the like you can join me. Like where Leia maybe thought like, okay, well, this could just be the end. But then Luke's like, no, 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 I'm not done here. Let's continue this road, but let's continue it together, because I also know that you and I are twins. I know that now too, and that's the only reason why I was able to have this strength, because of you, something like that, something cheesy like that. And then there's she's like devastated or whatever, and then get this, they have a fight, the two of them fight. And it's going to be just like, either Vader or either Luke or Leia is injured in the battle. Something happens where something crashes into the throne room or something, they get separated, and then that's kind of where it ends, like the Return of the Jedi.
Hmm. So, which do you think is more likely, that Luke converts Leia to the dark side, or that Leia reverts Luke back to the light?
I mean, at that point, which is more likely?
Or
I
maybe which is more likely, and which would make for the better story? And
Okay,
maybe they're the same thing,
right.
but yeah.
I'm thinking of the more likely. The more likely would be Leia turning Luke back, and this is why. Because Leia, she's had all of these years in the Senate, in the Galactic Senate. She's seen the terrible things that the Sith have done, or that the Emperor have done. So she is very much against anything that is, that ever had the Emperor's touch on it, right? And that being the dark side. So I think she would definitely be like, no way, there's no way I'm doing that. Where on Luke's side, right, I think that he would be more, because he's the one that kind of flip flopped, right? So he was rebellion, he was light side user, but then he went back, and so the delta is smaller, for that change to change
Hmm.
back, where it would be harder sell for Leia because she's always been on this side.
Right. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think. Well, I guess I'll just read you like the last little part of the one that I wrote out today, or in preparation for today. My idea was that Luke and Vader go to face the Emperor together. The Emperor's like just a little bit too strong. Leia shows up, and then like they all three just collectively face the Emperor and defeat him together. Vader is really badly wounded, but before dying, he's like, tells Luke and Leia to like, you know, their siblings work together. Like, thank you, Luke. Thank you, Leia. Like, we did this as a family, and then he dies, and then it's like Luke and Leia are left to rebuild the Jedi Order. So I guess I took like a slightly more optimistic look on that. But
Right,
honestly,
right, yeah.
like maybe this will be a fun way to kind of like round out our conversation about potential outcomes of a a what if Return of the Jedi throne room scenario. What is your most like out there idea? And I have one already, so if you need to take a minute to think of one.
Most out there. Oh, yeah, you can go first if you already have one.
Well, okay, I was thinking like, so I was kind of going with the story I had already. Like, Vader trains Luke. They show up to face the Emperor, and I'm like, what could happen next that would just be like super out there and no one would ever expect? Leia shows up, and she's trying to get Luke and Vader to not give in to their hatred, and she somehow, I don't, you'd have to like really work on the story details here because I don't feel like, as I'm saying it on the surface, it makes much sense. But somehow the Emperor convinces Leia to join him, and
Okay.
then like they go their separate ways. Vader's injured. The Emperor trains Leia. Vader trains Luke, and then it's like this epic 2v2 that happens later.
That'd be crazy.
And then wait for it. It's not over yet.
Oh,
As the battle's happening, the elevator opens. Guess who's standing there?
Lando.
Yoda.
Yo, yeah. I forgot
And
he doesn't die right away in this timeline.
yeah, he whips out some Attack of the Clones jumpy jump moves, and oh man, it's a epic. I don't know what the conclusion of the showdown was, but that was my really out there weird idea I had.
That's a good one.
Do you have any?
Oh boy, way out there. I feel like what I've been saying has been kind of just out there, just continue to have Luke down that path. I mean, that just the thought of that, right, is kind of like bone chilling, to imagine just Luke not ever turning back. I think that's probably the crazy thought. Like maybe that they will continue to just have this balance in the force of the light and the dark between the twins. I think
Mm-hmm.
that would be almost poetic too, like because it wasn't there. I think there was a Visions episode that had something like similar with that too, where
Yes, yeah.
one twin was on on each side of the force.
Right. Well, and there was that old Republic cinematic back in the day, maybe like 15 years ago, of the two
Oh yeah
twins.
yeah.
One of them's wearing, I think they're both technically dark side force users, but one of them's wearing white and one of them's wearing black. And the other one, the one who gives into his anger, oftentimes like accidentally kills his brother in a moment of real hatred and
Mm-hmm.
something like that, I guess.
Right, yeah, and it was actually the good one, the one that was wearing the white,
Hmm.
right? I think that was the that was the trick there. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean this is fun. I mean just to even have the discussion of what what it could mean like going forward into Star Wars. I mean, and just like the cascading things, like what would Obi-Wan think? What would like the rebellion think? What would because the rebellion's going to have to like go after Luke now. Things like that. You just you just never really think of. But my thing would be I would love to see this extend like past episode 6. Where it's not just you have it's all like where you're kind of like, all right, it's all nicely wrapped up in a nice little bow. I like to have that like, well, like the after the credits scene, that they always have, like,
Yeah.
Darth Luke will return in 2025, whatever, something like
Yeah.
that. I think that would be a cool thing to just continue on, because honestly, that would have been like you think from like a business standpoint, because people are gonna be like, oh yeah, let's keep this rolling because this was so good.
Yeah, like Luke Skywalker's the leader of the First Order now, or something like that.
Right, yeah.
Be kind of wild. You know what this wants to make once like I want to do after an episode like this? I almost want to have like a competition or like a contest for people. And it's like submit your fan fictions basically.
Yeah,
And
and
then
we
and
just read
then
them.
we
We
just
just
read
go
them.
through them. Yeah,
And then like we pick the best one and maybe there would be like a prize for the first place fan
yeah,
fiction or
yeah.
something like I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that do that or have done that before.
Right,
I
yeah.
just think it'd be so fun to have like so much different input from Star Wars fans. You get all these different perspectives and potential stories and outcomes, and just the idea of that sounds really fun to me. But hey, if you're listening or if you're watching on YouTube, let us know on the socials or in the comments of the YouTube video. If you want to do something like that, I mean, I'd read some Star Wars fan, short stories.
I mean, there it might be better than the actual canon stuff that we've been seeing lately. Just
You're not wrong. You're not
sure.
wrong. Well, having said all of that, again, let us know your thoughts on today's episode. Would you want to see Luke join Vader, join the dark side? What would that look like for a a different sequel trilogy where maybe Luke is the bad guy? Let us know your thoughts on today's question of the week over on the socials or in the comments of the video version of the podcast. And on next week's episode of the podcast, episode 105, to kind of tie this into some of the news that we touched on today, there's a lot of upcoming Star Wars projects. There's been a ton of news about upcoming Star Wars projects. I think it's fair to say there's also a lot of confusion about like what is happening, what is not happening. If it is, what stage is it actually at? Like, what does it mean that we have a writer confirmed, but that production hasn't started? Like, all those questions and more are what we'll be dealing with in next week's episode of the podcast.
Might be a 4-hour
Uh,
episode.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we'll cover stuff, short term as Skeleton Crew that comes out in less than 3 weeks, to as long term as however many movies we've been getting announced lately that are like, yep, coming out in 2032. We're really excited for it. So, all of the upcoming projects from the newly or soon to be released ones to the long awaited ones we'll be covering in next week's episode of the podcast. So stay tuned for that. Gonna be a fun one next week. And having said all of that, want to give you one last reminder that if you're not yet subscribed to the Hoth Hangout podcast on YouTube, check us out for the video version of the podcast, as well as our reactions to the latest Star Wars shows when they come out, including our reactions to the upcoming Skeleton Crew show, which will be available over on the Hoth Hangout YouTube channel. Check us out there. You can contact us via email at hothhangout@gmail.com with your Star Wars thoughts, questions, or short fan fiction stories. We'd love to have those sent to our email too. If any of you out there are, fancy yourself a writer, send us your Star Wars fan fictions to our email, and we'd love to check them out. You can find the Hoth Hangout podcast anywhere you get your pods, including both Apple and Spotify. And if you're listening on either of those platforms or any platform that allows you to leave a 5-star review, leave a 5-star review on the podcast. We'd appreciate it very much. And it also does allow it to be more easily discovered by other people that love Star Wars as well. We're on the socials on Instagram, TikTok, and X at Hoth Hangout on each of those platforms. And you can find the link to our community Discord server down in the show notes of today's episode as well. Joey, any last thoughts on all things Star Wars? What if? Will this be something we get someday? What do you think about Luke potentially being a dark side Force user?
I hope we get something from Star Wars. I mean, but you're right. I mean, there are a lot of like just very talented writers out there. They don't have to be writing for Star Wars. So I would love to like get my hands on some fan fiction to see what other people thought. And this maybe this is a new little episode type of thing that you and I will do. Just throw our what if questions at us and see what we can come up with. Like, what if the Emperor was a light side user, something like that? How kind of crazy thing would that be? So this was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun like writing this podcast together, and I'm sure you did as well with your fan fiction.
Yeah, maybe if we get enough people wanting it, I'll release it to the. It's literally one page, and it's very poorly written in about 2 hours time or less. But actually, it's probably even less than that. It's probably more like an hour. But regardless, maybe we'll release that. Maybe we won't. Remains to be seen. Tell you what, I'll release it in the Hoth Hangout Discord server. How about that?
There you go. If you join the Discord server, you can see it.
If you join the Discord server, you can read the one-page fan fiction that I wrote for today's episode. So, lastly, thank you to Gibbo for producing today's show video and assets. Gibbo, who would never turn to the dark side.
Never.
Shout out to Gibbo, who was unable to be with us today, but shout out to you, Joey, for doing the behind-the-scenes work today, some of the scene changes and whatnot and stuff like that, and all the preparations that go into that. So, shout out to you as well. And much love to Gibbo. Hopefully we'll catch you on next week's episode of the podcast, Gibbo. I do also want to mention, Gibbo, guess how long this podcast took? Less than an hour.
Let's go. We could talk for another 2.5 minutes and we'd be still under.
Oh, can we make it? I don't know. I think we're going to make it.
This is where Gibbo like, hurry up.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening to today's episode. We hope to catch you in next week's episode of the podcast. Once again, where we'll be talking about all the upcoming Star Wars projects. Appreciate you so very much. We'll catch you in the next one. And until then, may the Force be with you.